All right, our next speaker is the president of the atheist community of Austin, Texas, and host of a live cable television program, The Atheist Experience, which I'm sure most of you have seen. It's been on cable and streamed live to the world. A fundamentalist Christian for more than 25 years, his best efforts to become a minister backfired and gave birth to one of the most prolific voices on atheism of the past decade. Ladies and gentlemen, Matt Dillahunty.
All right. Thanks so much, and thanks everybody for having me here and coming out. I hope all the people that I hired to ask questions aren't sitting up in the balcony, because that's going to be a long, long walk. And I'm hoping to actually leave time for questions. By the way, just out of curiosity, I can't see a damn thing. How many people here are actually familiar with the atheist experience? Okay. Nonprofits? And godless bitches. My wife loves you, by the way. And she's really sorry that she couldn't be here. So at last night's debate, I'm assuming most of you were there, there was a question, I think it was about ridicule, and I didn't get to address it. I thought I had 20 seconds, but the moderator was a dick. I'm just teasing. That was fine. And so what I was going to say in that 20 seconds is that ridiculous ideas are, by definition, deserving of ridicule. So the question really isn't about whether or not they deserve ridicule. It's about whether or not it's wise, and I'll get to that. But there's some things I didn't get to say during the debate last night, and I figured since I have a podium, and, well, I'm lazy, and I don't like to do all the slidey stuff, I'm just going to talk about some of the things briefly that I didn't get to mention last night. The first is, and I did talk about this a little bit, but I wanted to kind of expand on it, this idea that I just didn't try hard enough. Or that I have some bias that prevents me from actually attaining this revelation of God that everybody else seems to get for a song. Not only can I not imagine anybody who tried harder, although I suppose maybe it's possible, but any God who expected more from me in seeking Him out can kiss my ass. That God's not worth knowing. And I put in far more effort than any God could possibly be worth. I'm not mad at Michael Horner for saying more than once that basically I just didn't try hard enough, because he's a victim of his religion just as I was. And I don't think he was trying to be mean about it. I think he was desperately trying to stay within his limits of his views and acknowledge that, yes, there's a real issue here. On morality, the problems that Michael sees with secular morality, by the way, aren't solved at all by appealing to a God. We agree that people can kill each other, whether or not there's a God. We agree that people can be good, whether or not there's a God, although their Bible disagrees with them. I mean, they said last night we could be good, but I don't know what they say about Psalms 14. But so his objection about a lack of objective standards without a God is not one that I necessarily disagree with, or not only disagree with, sorry, but I think it's actually backwards. And August talk this morning addressed all that, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on morality, which I've spent so much time on morality in the last few months, it's crazy. So his solution ultimately comes down to accountability. If you kill someone and and you don't get punished in this life, there's a punishment in the next life, and that just really makes you feel good. I mean, we can't stop somebody from slaughtering your family, and if they don't get caught here, it makes us feel a whole lot better that maybe there's justice outside of this world. Except that the system that he advocates and believes in is black and white, heaven and hell, overly simplistic, one punishment, one reward, pretty much. That's it. Additionally, the punishments and reward in this next life don't do a damn thing for us in this life. That's an appeal to something that's outside of the actual experience. And it includes exceptions and loopholes. There's nothing just about it. The individual who slaughters your entire family can, by many different Christian views, achieve salvation and redemption and go to heaven. So there's no ultimate punishment there. It's an entirely, Christianity at its core is an unjust system. Original sin, substitutional atonement, and is it any wonder that people who can be made to believe that the unjust is just can also believe that the untrue is true. For those who aren't aware of my history, I was raised primarily as a Southern Baptist, and I forgot to start my timer. so that you can ask questions, because I'll talk for days. I don't know if anybody knew that. It's another reason I don't really prepare too much, because you ask me a question and I'll answer it 10, 15 minutes. I moved from being a Southern Baptist to an atheist over a period of a couple of years. I've talked about that on a show. I don't want to go into great detail. But I sincerely felt that I did have a relationship with God. So this thing about seeking God I wasn't a non-believer seeking out a God. I was already a sincere believer who was just wanting God to please give me a little bit of something other than static. You know, I believe that this is real, and I want to serve you. I was in the pathway to becoming a minister. Now, you know, this explains why, you know, Jeff D, you know, you threaten Jeff D with hell, you're going to get, you know, fire and brimstone in return, and you treat me as stupid or say that I wasn't sincere, and you're going to get that as well. So I was looking not for God to necessarily demonstrate his existence, which I already believed in, but for God to reaffirm, to comfort this, to offer some sort of answer to all the questions that I had, all the things that were actually bothering me that didn't make sense. And since coming out and changing my views, I got involved with the atheist community of Austin, jumped in on a show that's actually been around for 14 or 15 years. I've only been involved with it for the last 6 or 7, and I absolutely love it. I love doing it. Unfortunately, doing it so much has afforded me the opportunity to come out to things like this, so I don't get to do the show as much. So tomorrow, Russell is going to be hosting, as I'll still be here. And I was always a skeptic. I just didn't apply it to my religious beliefs. And, oh, am I walking too far away from the light? Okay. They told me to stay in the light, because that's where the mic works. But, toward the light. So I had always been a skeptic. I just didn't apply it to my religious beliefs. And so it's no surprise that I've been as active as possible in the skeptic community. And this, over the course of several years now, it's caused me to realize some things. I once would have said I'm a bit of an oddball. And yet, curiously, I would imagine that there's a great many people in this room and at every room that I talk at who are in this same oddball situation. And that is, oftentimes, atheist groups aren't secular or aren't skeptical enough for me, and skeptical groups aren't atheist enough for me. That's a really frustrating place to live. And in the course of this, kind of tailoring off of the last talk that Desiree gave, it was this idea that there are firebrands among us. That's, by the way, if I was going to title this talk, it'd probably be Firebrand, because I am one. I don't think it's unfair. I've called myself an evangelical atheist. I'm fine with Firebrand. I mean, it's a person who kindles strife or encourages unrest and a troublemaker. I'm that. I am an enemy of religion. No, make no bones about it. I'm not necessarily an enemy of every religious person. I actually would argue that I'm a friend to the religious people, the one who's trying to save them from their religion. But there is a section of the community that has been often labeled accommodationists who want to get up and say, hey, all you firebrands, you're harming the movement. You're doing damage. You shouldn't take that tact. Don't be a dick. And they, on occasion, they've appealed back to happier days and happier times in the free thought movement. And so one of my heroes is Colonel Robert Greene Ingersoll. And he was, in the late 19th century, an outspoken advocate of things like an 8-hour workday, equality, suffrage. Well, he spoke at the Republican National Convention. He debated clergy in newspapers. He spoke in front of large audiences about religion. He was known as the great agnostic, and I think that if they didn't know better, accommodationists would probably point at Ingersoll as one of the hallmarks that we should endeavor to replicate. And yet, when I look at some quotes, I'm going to just read a couple of quotes from Ingersoll that I like. I'm quote mining my favorites. The doctrine of eternal punishment is in perfect harmony with the savagery of the men who made the orthodox creeds. It is in harmony with torture, with flaying alive, and with burnings. The men who burned their fellow men for a moment believed that God would burn his enemies forever. The old lady who said there must be a devil, else how could they make a picture that looked exactly like him, reasoned like a trained theologian, like a doctor of divinity. We are satisfied that there can be but little liberty on earth while men worship a tyrant in heaven. Every sect is a certificate that God has not plainly revealed his will to man. To each reader, the Bible conveys a different meaning. Every pulpit is a pillory in which stands a hired culprit defending the justice of his own imprisonment. Many people think they have religion when they are troubled with dyspepsia. I don't think that anything Colonel Ingersoll said is, I don't know, particularly inflammatory, but I don't know that it's any different than anything that I've said or that PZ said. So what's the problem here? Why is this perception of the great agnostic different from the assholes who attack religion on a regular basis? I don't know. Last night at the debate, there was this kind of redefinition of atheism, or an appeal to a particular definition of atheism, let's say, because he did, cite Bertrand Russell and others, basically trying to saddle me and Chris DiCarlo, thanks so much for the debate, with the anti-theist position, and asserting that it's the only viable definition of atheism. In a recent video, I don't know how many people have seen it, Neil deGrasse Tyson, who I admire and respect and am thrilled to have him speak to the public about science, talked about how he doesn't like to be labeled as anything, no ist, other than maybe scientist. But his claim, he might as well have been sitting on the other side of the table last night, because what he's doing is buying into this particular notion about atheism as a dogmatic assertion. And in saying that, he's actually working against us. Now, am I being a dick saying don't do that? No. Because Neil's entitled to his own views and his own opinion. He gets to label himself and choose what he doesn't get to be labeled as. I just disagree with him. That's the fundamental difference between the Firebrands and the accommodationists, is that the Firebrands are sitting here saying, yeah, we need to go after religion. By the way, if you're not going after religion, I don't know what's wrong with you. Are you not paying attention? Are you just not incensed at what's going on, at how it affects people, about how it destroys lives and divides nations and imprisons people and enslaves them? I don't know what you're doing. But you're entitled to do it. And the accommodationists, on the other hand, would look at the Firebrands and say, you guys are doing the wrong thing. You need to stop because you're harming the movement. Bite me. Thanks. That said, last night I defended atheism in a philosophical sense, this idea that atheism is one thing in the terms of this debate. And I kind of want to address that, because atheism, in that philosophical sense, is one thing. It's the rejection of theistic notions. It can be defined in other ways. We can have some debate about what it means. I don't know how much we're actually going to get out of that. But who we are as atheists, what we do, is so much more than this one little issue. I don't know, I'm not going to sit here and say that it's justifiable to put it all under a label of atheism or secularism or free thought or whatever label. I don't care about the label. But by and large, when we're talking about what we see in the atheist community, and I agree that it is most definitely a community, there are shared ideas. Doesn't mean everybody's on the same page about everything. That's a different context than what we talked about last night. So while I defend this philosophical idea of atheism in a debate, what I do on a daily basis with the atheist community of Austin addresses the so much more aspect of atheism. For the time period, I just got reelected as president again a couple weeks ago. Don't clap, because it's pretty much, if I show up, that's what's going to happen. And I told them that this is going to be my last year as the president of the ACA. I'm still going to be involved in the show. I'm still going to be involved in the organization. But I have concerns that, I'm so busy, there's so much going on, and I've been the only one running this for the past 6 years or so, that I want somebody else to come in. That type of thing needs to happen all over the place. We cannot wait for the old man club to die off and then figure out what we're going to do. When I talk to student groups for the Secular Student Alliance, the thing that I tell them every time is, make the juniors your presidents, your leaders, so that they are there for one whole year to train up the next group, so that these university groups don't die out every couple of years and have to get somebody come along to light a fire under their ass. So, in the context of all these discussions, I would argue, and I won't go into it in too great a detail because I think Desiree just touched on it, is the idea that we need both diplomats and firebrands. We need all approaches, and that sometimes those are, in fact, the same person. We lost something in between Ingersoll and Madalyn Murray O'Hair, who I would say was like, I don't know, 90% firebrand, and maybe there's a 10% diplomat in there. I didn't get to meet her. There are people that I work with in the ACA who swear that she and I would have got along really well until we got into an argument, and then we probably would have hated each other. But in the years that I've done the show, you can go out and you can find clips of the show where I am holding someone's hand metaphorically and patiently leading them toward a conclusion, using just the Socratic method, helping them get to where they need to go. You can find other clips where I'm not. You can find clips where I am clearly an asshole railing against someone's religion. And I think they're both deserved, and I think they're both valuable. And that's why I do them. We get tons of email, and I do listen to criticism and read it and respond to people. I do endeavor to do my best to try to attack the argument, not the person making it, and I fail. When I said I was an enemy of religion, but not necessarily religionists, there are most definitely religionists that I am an enemy of. The people who I feel are blatantly dishonest, people who have had simplistic things explained to them to the point where no rational person could continue to repeat what they repeat. Take Ray Comfort, for example. Ray's been on the show via phone. He kind of ducked for a while until a lot of the fans of the show pushed him into it, so thank you, because I had a good time and got Ray to admit that he doesn't agree with everything that's in the Bible, and that Russell and I are delusional or stupid, I think were the two options, something along those lines. But I like Ray more than a lot of other atheists do. He's probably a really nice guy. I don't have any way of, I cannot be so gracious to him as to write off his rampant repetitions of ignorance as anything other than flat-out deception on some occasions. I understand that he's not necessarily going to get it every time. I've been there. By the way, my IQ didn't go up in this transition from theist to atheist. I used to say I didn't get smarter. I think that's probably wrong. I probably did get smarter depending on how you define it, because now I know more. And my falling away from religion was based on this kind of increased understanding of the universe that we live in. But there are people at this convention who I've already talked to who are either atheists or activists because of what we've done on the show. And I hear that everywhere I go, and it makes all the stupid, crazy phone calls worth it, and it makes the debates worth it. We're talking about figuring out exactly what we're doing. The Atheist Community of Austin's in the United States, it's a nonprofit educational organization, and we use the show as our tool to educate people. I like the fact that people have benefited from what I've gone through, or what Russell and Jen and Jeff and the rest of them have gone through, or what they've said, the analogies that Tracy comes up with on the fly that just bowl people over. The fact that there's a vehicle for us to continue getting information out. And much the same way that I would like to quote from Ingersoll, I didn't know about Ingersoll when I was growing up. He was long dead. And where I went to school and the family that I was with, I'd have never heard of him. I hadn't even heard of Thomas Paine, actually, while I was in school, because they don't want to tell you about the guy who, named the United States and wrote books that are in direct opposition to what I was taught was truth So the idea that the internet has been the biggest boon, I think, to new atheism that we've ever seen. And on the internet, you're going to find both diplomats and firebrands. I lost my place. That's because there's really not a place here. So the conversation about the existence of God, one of the reasons I do the debates is because I think it's worth having. I'm not trying to convince the people on the other side, although I will admit I hold out hope for one of the two from last night, because we're going to have a conversation after the fact. Not a whole lot of hope, but a little bit of hope. And it's happened. I have friends who are ministers and ex-ministers. I'm concerned with what people in the pew believe. Because what they presented last night and what you tend to see from what they would call sophisticated theology, which I've relabeled as obfuscated theology, has nothing to do with what anybody at home believes. Nobody has, I'll say this, it's a little hyperbole, but nobody's ever come to believe in the existence of any God, let alone Jesus, because of the transcendental argument for the existence of God. That's just stupid. What happened is, thanks. Matt Slick would probably disagree with you, and I don't get to listen to his podcast because I don't get to listen to any podcast, but my wife does, and evidently he's named a fallacy after me now. I don't. I'll have to look it up, but he may come back on for tag. But the point about that is that they started with this belief in God or Jesus or whatever, and then they try to work the arguments to fit what they want. And when we work in opposition to that, we have, I would say, a duty to be as precise as we can and not worry necessarily about whether or not they get offended, because most of them are already offended by the fact that we exist, that we don't agree with them, and that we won't shut up about it. And if they're already going to be offended, then I'm not that worried about if I hurt their feelings because I show that their argument isn't valid, or if I just flatly say it's stupid. Because some of them really are. There are some arguments that just aren't even worth addressing. And I don't know how this happens. But if I get feedback on a regular basis, and people, at lunch today, somebody was saying, oh, I like the way you're really patient, you take a breath, and you seem to listen to them, and then you deconstruct their argument and communicate it back. That's just so good. And the person sitting on the other side of me said, yeah, and my friend thinks you're just an asshole all the time. And there are individual calls that have come into the show where I will get email that says, wow, that was the best call ever, you did a great job, that was perfect, you just, how do you have that much patience? And I will get another email about the exact same call that will say the opposite. Oh, you really screwed that up. Why did you hang up on that person? Why were you such an asshole to them? Why can't you just lead them along and help and try to be helpful? I long ago gave up trying to please everybody. I'll admit, I'm mostly here to please me. Although at this convention, I'm here to please you. Let me backtrack on that a little bit. I have no plans at all to stop being a dick, because I don't think, thanks. I don't think that the people who are telling me I'm a dick mean the same thing by it that I do. I think that telling people the truth, even if it's uncomfortable, is a good thing. That you may, on occasion, not tell the truth just because you can. That it's a really difficult decision to make about how you're going to approach things, how you're going to talk to people, how you're going to relate to people, and that there's room in this movement for all tactics. I had a friend of mine, I know this is the Imagine No Religion 2 conference, a friend of mine, Dennis, on the show, was asked once, yeah, but once you get rid of religion, what do you replace it with? And Dennis said, once you get rid of cancer, what do you replace that with? I'm going to open it up for questions in just a couple of minutes. But I want to kind of say a couple things first. This is all so much easier than a lot of people make it out to be. Not to say that there aren't difficult situations and things we have to address, but by and large, this is so much easier than people make it out to be. Religions haven't demonstrated the truth of their claims. And even if they had, they are divisive and harmful. If the God of the Bible is real, wanted to demonstrate this conclusively right now, I'd believe and I'd no longer be an atheist. But there's no way I could worship that being or probably any other being. The entire concept of worshiping someone is something that I just find kind of abhorrent. Religions need to be eliminated. Not by force, not by violence, not by legislating them away, although legislation may be involved in ensuring the freedom and liberty of those who are not religious. But the best way is by eliminating ignorance and fear, because ignorance and fear are where religions live. It is where they breed, and it is where they begin to plot how to do more harm to people. Someday we'll be able to wax nostalgic about the superstitions of today while combating the superstitions of tomorrow. I can kind of imagine no religion. But I think what I really imagine is a world where religion is irrelevant, where people are a little embarrassed to offer up their superstitious beliefs for public consumption. I am occasionally a dick. I am occasionally arrogant and condescending, insulting and hostile. I have occasionally resorted to name-calling, and if that's all I'd ever done, I'd still be okay with it. Because I feel that in most cases, it was justified. I've made mistakes, everybody makes mistakes. But you can't summarize who I am or the entire structure of my character with a single word or a label like, oh, he's an asshole. Yeah, I am sometimes. Maybe quite often, I don't know. I'm a firebrand and a diplomat at different times, and I tried to show a little bit of that last night in the debate. There were so many times where I would have just loved to grab that microphone and go off. But I recognize that in the context of a formal debate, there's a limit to how much Matt from the show can show up here. There's also a limit about how much you could possibly keep out, because when you tell me that I didn't try hard enough, and I hate to keep harping on this point, but that's no. I'm passionate about the truth. I'm passionate about humanity, and because I'm passionate, that means that sometimes I'm not going to be nice, and I'm not going to play nice, because I don't think the opposition plays nice. I think when they attempt to play nice, they're really being snide and condescending, patronizing. That pisses me off. The accommodationists who would claim that Firebrands are doing harm to the movement, they need to make a clear, specific accusation and then back it up with evidence. Because I've got years of emails from people who have benefited from the show, and constant conversations with people at this conference and every other from people who have benefited from the show, and I will put the results of what we've done at the Atheist Experience up against any results from any one of the accommodationist assholes any day. Question?